Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our Break the Isaac podcast series, where today we have an episode where we'd like to commemorate International Women's Week by reflecting on one of the events that happened, arguably one of the more impactful events, as it not only tackled women, but also women of the black community. It was an Afro-Textured hair workshop hosted by Emmanuella, Kampe, and Lauricenia. It happened on Friday the 12th, and it was one of the final events of Feminism Week. And to reflect on that event, we have our special guest, Kano.
Hi.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Um, I'm Kano Nagata. I'm G11 and I'm from Japan.
Nice. So I'd like to start by going over the contents of the workshop and your thoughts on it.
Yeah.
So, firstly, they talked about the history of Afro
Yep.
hair. There was a lot of talk about symbolism, how people wore hairs in different ways to represent different phases of their lives, such as
Yeah.
the Amasunzu, locks, the Fulani braids.
Yeah.
Which one jumped out to you?
I think first of all, what I really liked about the session, regarding like how Kampe, Lauricenia, and Emmanuella all like explained the topic was that they were very passionate about it, so they knew about it like a lot, and especially I remember Kampe talking about Amasunzu and how it represented like. As you were saying, it represented a lot of things, and one specific thing I remember was that there was like this specific way that Amasunzu was like that like woman who went into puberty and like was ready to get married would make, and Kampe made a joke that it was like kind of like modern day Tinder but in the past. And
Yeah.
I really liked the way that all of them like did the session. It was really interesting. And yeah, I also liked how she talked about like modern day actresses re doing that hairstyle again to make it like a comeback. And yeah, it was really interesting how they were really proud of like their hairstyle and how each of them had so much meaning that I of course totally didn't know about. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that sense of pride and passion they presented it with, and them trying to explain it in a more modern context certainly helped you a lot. Yeah.
Definitely.
Um, but we noticed that it was only not a symbol on the African continent,
Yeah.
but it transferred to the American continent when they were brought over by ships as slaves.
Right.
Um, in the United States, they explained to us that the hair was used as
Yeah.
communication methods, and even as like other practical means such as transportation. Were you aware of any of this
No,
before the
not at
workshop?
all. Yeah, definitely not. And I found it really interesting how I was definitely really surprised about how it was used and like definitely about like the locks.
Uh huh.
Like I knew about it slightly, but I didn't know like the full context. And it was really nice to hear like Kari's jumping in to say like, oh, we don't use the term dreadlocks anymore, but it's now just called locks, and that word is also evolving. And
Yeah.
that was also really interesting, and I really enjoyed listening about that. Yeah, definitely.
That's true. How important do you think it is for us to learn about topics such as these and specific ways you would word things to like not be offensive or to mean it in the best way you could?
I think it's really important because the way that you like react and interact with these words become completely different, right? So, for example, for me, like before I knew the whole context, like the whole history and everything like that, I didn't realize like how much it meant for the people and how much like I don't like even okay to give an example.
Yeah.
I didn't really know about like the history of the N word before like learning about it and coming like when I came to G10 Isaac, and then I learned about it during history. And I think like that really like changes your idea towards them, even if you think that you're aware of something. By knowing like the more depth like history, it completely changes like how heavy it is,
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of in a
yeah.
way, if if that makes sense. Yeah.
I think what I admired most about you and the other people that went who were non-black or were not familiar with this is their openness and willingness to engage and learn. I think it's certainly an important aspect of being in an international school and a global citizen.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I don't know if you'll touch bases on this in the other questions, but I was really thankful to the three people who organized it because I think as much as we talk about, let's say, like theories, right, in UWC, like, oh, we should accept diversity and we should be leaders and everything, what does that actually look like? And I feel like Kampe, Emmanuella, and Lauricenia all like brought that in, like, it was like a slap in the face, like, oh yeah, this is what we really came here for, right? To like share about our like cultures and our problems from back home that affects the whole world, right? Yeah, so
like,
that's what I thought.
I think this was a specific case, and it was an excellent one at that.
It was.
But like, what are some other now that you know that you have the ability to learn and to understand more about the world, what other parts of the world or the other cultures you would like to know more about?
Well, after the session, I thought a lot that so basically after this session, right, I realized like until now I had been thinking a lot about how to change the school like systematically, but after this session I realized like if everyone had an input from their own country, then like that's the easiest way and that's the most fastest way we can make the school better as students, right? And going back to your question, I think one topic that I would definitely like to learn more about is mental health because, and I know that's not really like from a specific country, but I think it's really important. And that's one thing that I was like definitely not aware of. Like it was never close to me. Like I knew it existed. I knew my friends had like mental health problems sometimes and things like that. But like the way that my mother and my father taught me, like it was like almost as if it was pseudoscience kind of thing, and like it's not that I don't want to learn, it's that I never had the opportunity to. So that's one area that I would definitely like to learn more about, what does that actually look like, what is that? And yeah, I really hope that someone does a session about it. Yeah.
I really appreciate this desire to learn and this fire to know more. But let's turn our attention back to that workshop. One of their main topics was cultural appropriation, right? And how there's always a fine line, and that line is determined by each individual themselves. What is your own line? Because look, you're Japanese. There is an aspect of Japanese culture that has been criticized by the media for being appropriated, which is the kimono.
Yes.
It's been implemented into fast fashion. And like as a Japanese person, obviously hair might not be an aspect of cultural appropriation you're familiar with, but in terms of other aspects you're familiar with, what stance do you take on the issue?
For me, during the session, I actually thought like, oh yeah, maybe kimono is like one part of it because, as you said, it's being used for fashion. But in that specific case, I don't really take offense for it because for me, like I find the Western kimono and like the actual kimono completely different, right? And I don't blame like the individuals at all because like that's the kimono that they're, they are exposed to, and that's not something that I can control, and that's just like the fashion industries that took it out and then made it into a product. I don't think that that's necessary. I just find it like I just hope that those people who are wearing those kimonos can like someday maybe come to Japan and then realize like how beautiful the actual kimono is, and like maybe if they're able to appreciate it, then I don't think that, I mean, of course, the fact that they made it into a product is kind of interesting, but I think it's not really the individual's fault, and I just hope that someday they find out and find the beauty.
So tell me if I'm putting words in your mouth here, but from what I'm understanding, you think that cultural appropriation and the difference between cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation is the knowledge behind the use of it. And to be able to appreciate a culture, instead of appropriating it, you should have the knowledge behind the knowledge behind those symbols
Yeah.
and understanding of issues and the historical context of the symbol.
Yeah, I think one thing that's really important is how willing are you to learn once you find out, right? Are you gonna get really defensive and, like, for example, if you were wearing like a Western kimono and then I was like, oh, hey, that's actually Japanese culture, and then you're like, no, it's not, this is fashion, then I would be kind of like,
Got it.
come on. But I think if you're willing to learn and, if you actually genuinely like the pattern, then you're gonna like the actual one too, And I mean, I think that's not the same case with the hair.
Yeah.
The Afro-textured hair, but I think in the case of like a kimono, that's what I personally feel. I can't speak on behalf of all the Japanese, obviously, but that's how I think.
Yeah, you touched a little bit on the Afro-textured hair, but to bring it back to that workshop again, what is your stance on that topic specifically? Is it ever okay to wear braids, to wear up these styles of Afro-textured hair?
I don't think so. I mean, originally, I thought it was just a style, of hair. A lot of hip hop artists in the early 2000s in Japan definitely do that, and I think in Japan there are still a lot of people who like the afro hair, like the braids, who are like rappers and hip hops because they think that it's a style. But after the workshop, after knowing the history, I would definitely say no because that is cultural appropriation. After knowing, I wouldn't do it. And yeah, sorry, go on.
No, I just want to bring in a different perspective here. In the Afro-textured hair workshop, they mentioned that Afro-textured hair isn't exclusive to the African continent. That there are a number of the Southeast Asian population that is born naturally with this, and a number of oceanic tribes and people that are also born with this. So let's say one of these individuals choose to wear one of the hairstyles of Afro-textured hair from the African continent. What would be your take on that?
But what does that like? Does that mean that they like? Are you asking me? Do you think it's fine for them to naturally have that?
Yeah. No. I'm not asking if it's fine, because naturally they're born with it. So of course it has to be fine. But if you saw a person after what you've learned from that workshop, if you saw a non-African, a person that's not of African descent wearing some of those hairstyles, what would your opinion be of it?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't think that's my
place to.
Yeah, I don't think because I honestly don't know. I can't answer that. Maybe it's not okay, but at the same time, like, I honestly, I have no idea. I would like to know what people say though.
Yeah, because I brought it up because I wanted to understand perhaps maybe the perspective of someone who is outside of that community to see what they think.
I know for a fact that someone who's my friend who is African but is not black, and they wanted to have that hairstyle, and they asked one of the the African community, and they were not very willing to. So maybe it's not okay, but I have no idea. I'm sorry. I don't know.
I think to wrap things up, let's talk a little bit more general about our school, UWC Isaac Japan. How important do you think it is for members of the community to step up like Emmanuella, Kampe, and Lauricenia did and host these workshops to share a little bit more information about other parts of the world and try to educate us a little?
I think it's really important because in the also like the movie about Martin Luther King.
Yeah,
Was
yeah.
it right?
Movie
After
night.
the movie night, yeah, we had a session, and then during that like kind of mini talk, Amanda stood up and she was saying like we as a school are tended to like focus more on events like prom, winter ball. But what is the real reason why we're here? We're here because we're here to learn about different problems, about like things that are going around in different countries from the people, like the perspectives of the people who are actually there, bring it back home and share that within our community so that we could spread more awareness about this. Maybe we could help solve this problem. And I think um, when we're here, when we come here, we forget who we're representing, you know, where we come from, because of course it's natural, like we come here and we need to survive, we need to find a friendship group, we need to, you know, fit in. That makes sense, but it's also important that we don't forget why we came here, who we're representing. And I think as much as fun the as much fun the event is, it's also so nice to hear about these different problems that are happening, because you can also relate it to your like your own community, right? After hearing this, after Afro-Textured hair session, and in one of the slides they were talking about Don't Touch My Hair campaign, and they were saying like the speaker there, Minna something, yeah, she was saying that um, talking about like the human zoos that that were happening in the like the late 80s to the early 90s or something like that, and they were saying like how is that motivation, the motivation of a human zoo, different from people's like motivation to touching my hair, because the actions are still the same. And when I like looked at that, I thought a lot about like how foreigners are treated in Japan, because I hear a lot about like even students in Isaac about how like they don't like to be like pointed at and stared at, right? And I also talked about it during the session, but I used to justify that in my head as like, oh, that's because Japanese people are not used to foreigners. But isn't that just an excuse, you know? Even if we've never seen a foreigner, we should still respect each other as like human beings. And if you're interested in that person, maybe you could go up to them instead of pointing fingers at them. And I think like I was able to like relate my own problems, not my own, but you know, my problems at my country to what I learned there. And I think that was a really nice experience. And like, yeah, that's one of the reasons why I think it's really important to have these sessions, because you're going to be able to become more aware of the problems not only happening in the world but also in your country. Yeah.
Certainly. That's an awe-inspiring answer. And on that note, I think I'd like to wrap up this episode. Thank you so much
Yeah, no,
for
thank
coming
you.
on, for your time. You're certainly a great guest on this show.
Thank you. You're a great host.
Thank you everyone for listening. And remember,
you.
stay cool, break the Isaac. Cool, break the Isaac. Cool, break the